Hello, hello. In this video, I would like to deal with the evil God argument, or the evil God challenge. And I'm going to steelman it by calling it the nasty God argument, or the nasty God challenge, because evil God is an oxymoron. God, whatever he is like, he is good. He cannot be evil because he is the ground of existence, and there is nothing outside of God to look at God and repudiate his nature or pass a judgment and say, well, no, that's evil. So since there's nothing to contradict God, for God to not be self-contradicting, he has to self-identify as good. And even if he is all the things we hate, even if he is cruel and unjust and sadistic, if that is how God is, then that is good. And we've simply evolved to appreciate things that give us pleasure, but that doesn't make it good. That's just what our opinion. That's our opinion. That's how we've evolved. However God is, he is good. So for that reason, I'm not calling it the evil God. I'm calling it nasty God, because the point is, can God's goodness be malevolent, be all-hating? And the point to mention is that no one actually believes that God is all-hating. That's not the point. Everyone agrees basically that idea is absurd. The difference is that the atheist, the anti-theist, points out that yes, it is absurd, but you'll notice that all the logic that works for the nice God works, if you flip all the goods and bads around, it works for nasty God. And all the objections you'd like to throw at nasty God, if you flip the goods and bads around, the logic would also take down your nice God theodicies. So if the validity is symmetric on both of them, and we know that one is absurd, well, we've just proved that the other one's absurd, and that is the atheist's project. An example. On one hand, we would say, with our classical logic, we would say, well, God is all kind and all loving, omnibenevolent. He loves all, especially his own nature. He loves his nature so much he wants to create and perpetrate it and create other little creatures like himself who can freely choose to love. He knows that the best, the maximally nice universe is one where he is not the only loving creature, the only loving entity. There are creatures who can freely choose to love. And to freely choose to love means they can freely choose to not love, to hate. And that is how we traditionally explain the existence for the possibility of evil in a universe created by an all-good God. That's the classical theodicy. But we can flip that around, can't we? We can flip it around. We can say, well, instead of God's goodness being all loving, what if God's goodness is all hating? And he is just maximally hateful, omni-malevolent, loathes everything, hates himself, just wants to torture himself. And what better way to torture yourself than to create annoying little creatures who, while worshiping you for being their savior, you're basically subjecting them to pain and suffering and torturing them, and not getting too much of a kick, because remember, God hates himself. Most of all, he has to hate himself. So for that reason, he has to introduce pleasure. He has to give us good times, sunsets, and good food, and poetry, and families and loved ones, and he has to watch us go about life with smiles on our stupid little faces, and that just pisses him off, and he tortures us in return. And he is aware that the most hateful and nasty universe is one where he is not the only nasty creature, where there are nasty entity, where there are other free agents who can freely enter into nasty behavior and choose to be nasty, and that's the worst universe that there is. And what we've done is we've just described the world as it is two different ways, and the logic that supports one supports the other, and that's the challenge of what the theist now has to do is find a premise that when directed at nasty God poses some sort of paradox that proves that that doesn't make sense, but when pointing it at nice God makes perfect sense. No paradox. That's what we got to do. So what I propose is that an omni-malevolent God, all-hating, all-loathing God must be self-hating, and infinitely so. He's got to hate himself, and as he hates himself, well, he would never submit to his own will, because you don't submit to the will of something you hate. This would create a paradox, because he can't will his own will. He has to hate his own will. He cannot satisfy or frustrate his hatred, because any attempt to frustrate himself would just be a roundabout expression of trying to satisfy himself. And that makes a paradox. And to fix the paradox, if you fix that paradox, you will break the symmetry. If you break the symmetry, the whole argument goes down, because the whole argument rests on the fact that it's symmetrical and that there are no paradoxes in one that don't appear in the other. So the way to fix the paradox would be to say, well, yeah, God, the all-hating God, hates everything else, but not his own nature. But that's just completely arbitrary. God, if he exists, is an absolute, and absolutes don't have arbitrary, like, oh, well, God hates 90%. Well, why 90? Why not 91%? And what if one of his creatures has, like, what if I had some of God's hateful nature? Would God love me? Or would he hate me still? If he does, it's just entirely arbitrary. It doesn't, it's not really, it's very ad hoc, if you will. So to keep it consistent and to keep it symmetrical, you have to stick with that paradox, and there you are. We have a paradox on one side, and that makes perfect sense on the other side. If you want symmetry, you've got the all-benevolent God, who is self-affirming. Because he is self-affirming, that implies that he is coherent. Being coherent implies that it is possible that he exists. Meanwhile, on the other side of the symmetry, you have all-hating God, who hates himself. He is self-contradicting, self-canceling. He is incoherent, and that implies that it is not possible that he exists, and I think both are right. Good, nice God, possible that he exists. Not nice God, not possible that he exists. I mean, yeah, there's your symmetry, and I think both are true. And this premise shows a paradox in nasty God that does not appear in nice God. Tell me what you think.